All right. I won't repeat myself about how important free body diagrams are. But I'll go back to the screen share here. Thanks, Andrew. I am terrible at that. So the whole point of this exercise was to get people leaning against each other and then think about, well, what if I decided that I wanted one person to be there alone without, and replace the other person or other things that are keeping me in place with forces. So let me show you the video. It's not the world's best video. But, my wife is all smiley. She wanted to make sure she looked good for the camera.
You might need to review the text for that one. We couldn't really hear it.
Yeah, you'll have to watch it. The whole idea is that when my wife would move away, that if I should stay in place, i.e. static, like in statics, we should be able to replace all of the external forces that keep me in place with forces somewhere. And then I would become a free body diagram. I would be free, if you will, of all the other things that are keeping me in place. And then we would replace those other things with forces. And that's the whole concept behind a free body diagram, is to basically cut away the object that you're trying to analyze and replace those things that you've cut away with forces. And basically, that's the essence of it. I'm going to move on to the next page here. So I know Joanne's going over this. I think you guys have a big homework assignment. Is that correct? You guys have a homework assignment with free body diagram drawings, something like 20 or 30 of them?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're not doing that many today. The concept that I'm trying to get across today is about how to deal with putting free bodies together and dealing with internal forces. But let me go over the basics first. So there's basically ways to draw forces. We talk about weight, gravity acting on a mass. We talk about applied force. That would be some external force that you're pushing on your free body. A normal force is something that typically when you're resting on a surface is applied. Tension is in a cable, and friction is some force resisting a sliding movement. And we have ways to draw each of these. And I think Joanne's we're pretty consistent on this, that this is how you draw these forces. If you have a weight, it's almost always, not almost always, it is always down, and you usually draw with a W, and you do it from the center of gravity. A normal, you usually draw towards the point of contact, and I like to see it labeled as N. If you have multiple, you can go NA, ND, NC, but N. And again, weight, you could have weight 1, weight 2, weight 3. Your applied force in the direction applied and where applied, and again, it's nice to draw as an F. Tension typically is T, and it's always away from the attach point. And lastly, we have friction, and you do it against and then on the surface. And you'll notice that I've drawn only one arrow there. So typically the surface would be above, and then you can see the arrow below. And typically the notation is F with an S, and that S is for static friction. There's also, of course, as you know, from physics, dynamic friction. Right here on this link at the bottom, I'm going to show you that. This link, I gave it to you guys last time because it's also useful in looking at connections. But here's a bunch of free body diagram problems, and there are different connections and different types, and they've all been solved. So you've got a problem and a solution, and a small discussion. Most of these initially are all about just the body. What I want to focus on today is a problem. I'm going to scroll down to it. You can see how many, and I encourage you to use this when you're doing the homework problems that you're set up. You can look at this. In fact, I think some of them may even be solved in here. So, but for instance, this is what I wanted to look at, and this one's kind of a similar to what I want to talk about. It's a little more complicated, but here you can see that there's a two-dimensional view of a log at the top, that big circle, and then there's a cradle that you would place the log into, say, cut it off if you were working out in the backyard. So there's two cross members with a pin in the middle, and then there's two cables. And so what I would like to do is draw free body diagrams of each of these parts, and they've done that. They've done for the log, one member, the other member, and what I want to do is also to show you what happens when you put them all back together and you draw the free body diagram of the entire unit. What ought to happen, and I'll go through this some more too, but ought to happen is each of these forces ought to cancel out. So for instance, when you put these two cross members together, if you'll notice that CX and CX when these two are in opposite directions, and so when they get put together into that main frame, they'll cancel each other out. And the same will happen with CY.
I'm glad you're pointing this out. I was having this question, Rob, about why those arrows are in opposite directions when it corresponds to the same pin. So that helps explain that. Thank you.
We'll definitely get into that in a minute. What I want you to know is that if you don't know which way to draw them positive. But we'll talk about why you would draw that in the opposite direction in a minute, Jason. What we're going to do is we're going to go on. And so this is the concept that I want to really nail today. And that's exactly what we're talking about today, Jason, is this very issue that seems to confuse a lot of students. And I'm not sure why, but it does. So that's why we're covering it. So we go on to the next page. So this is my backyard example. 3 cans of soup. You can see that somebody in the family likes Thai coconut, and we've got lentil soup and spicy chili. They're all stacked up, and so if we were to draw 3 body diagrams of each of these things, the top can, the middle can, the bottom can, and then all of the cans together, what would we be looking at? So let's sort of walk through this together. So if we look at all 3, we have all 3 cans, and so we just draw this like this, and then diagrammatically is off the right. So when we're doing the lab today, this is what I want you to do. You can draw right on top of them like this, but this is what I want to see is on the right. So we've got a normal force, and then we've got the weight of the 3 cans, and I just called it 3W. I assumed that all the cans weighed the same. So we got a normal force and the cans 3 weights. So this is what the free body diagram would look like, and that's pretty straightforward. You've got a normal force that should be equal to 3W. So let's look at the top can only. Let's call this W1 and this N1. So this is what the top can looks like. So we've got a top can. It's only 1 W, and we'll have this different N here. You'll notice I've given it a different nomenclature. Then up here it's just N, here it's N1. And this is important to keep track of your nomenclature. It really helps. I know it seems silly, but if you get it right, you'll have less confusion when you're writing the problem down to actually do the math. So let's look at the middle can. Again, this is fairly obvious. This is just like the 3 cans, except for, we're only looking at the top. The middle one's where it gets a little more exciting. So now we have that same normal force, equal and opposite, from N1 is now pushing down on the top. And then we have the weight of the second can in the middle, W, and then we have another normal from below, pushing up.
Can you comment on the relative magnitudes of N1 and N2?
I can tell you right away that N1 is going to be equal to W because you look at it right here. You know what N1 is. It's equal to W. But we're going to draw it like this for now, all right? N1. There may be other problems that are more complicated. So right now we're just going to say this is a force here. So we have N1. So now we have N2. And of course, if you did that, it would be N2 is equal to W plus N1. And if you know what N1 is, which is W, it would be N2 is equal to 2 times W. But this is how you draw this. You have a normal force on top from the top contact, and you have a normal force from below from the bottom contact, and then you have the weight of the item itself. So this standalone free body of the middle can. Now let's look at the bottom can. Same thing as what was happening above, except for now, instead of the top, we'll have N2, we'll have W, and then we'll have N. Now this N, notice I didn't say N3. N is the same N that was in the 3 cans. It's the same N. It's the same place, it's the same force. So there you go. So it's N2 and W equals N2. And of course, Jason, as you noted, we solved up above that N2 is equal to W2. So now if we did the summation of forces in the vertical, we'd have W plus N2 equals N, and then N would then equal 3W. So the whole point of this, and this is what I really want you to grasp right here, is I've taken each of those three body diagrams, I've taken the top can, middle can, and the bottom can. When you add 3 of those together, you should get back to your original 3 body diagram. And what you'll see is, you see how N1 is going up, and here N1 is going down. Those two, when added together in opposite directions, become 0, right? Same magnitude, opposite directions, 0. Same thing happens to N2 here. So what happens is when we put this all together, we no longer are showing internal forces. In fact, you never draw on a free body diagram the internal forces, and that's the whole point, is that when you put this together, these become internal forces, N1 and N2, and you want them to cancel out, i.e. not be present in your free body diagram. So when you add these free body diagrams together, they should cancel out. So when we go back and look at this diagram, if we look at this, let me switch cameras here. You can see this. I want you to look at that real quick. What our free body diagram ought to look like in, stop sharing. Free body diagram of all right. If I were to draw this free body diagram of the entire thing, all I would have would be that would be my entire free body diagram. So if we go back and we look at that diagram in the problem, you can see that all of these internal forces will cancel out. You'll see that CY and CY are opposite directions, so when they put together, they cancel out. CX and CY will cancel out. N1 and N1 are in opposite directions, and they'll cancel out. N2 and N2 are in equal and opposite directions, and they'll cancel out. And then you can see T, the tension of the cable, will cancel out. So all we'll have left is what they're calling R, or A, and B, and W, just as I just showed.
Rob, can I comment on that?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance for me, and I think the reason is when I see that, I look at the weight of the log, as you said, and it has, it looks like an internal force to me. But really, the reason that it appears that way with only the W, maybe go back to your, if you're able to go back to your whiteboard image, that shows what the free body, thank you, would look like without internal forces. So it looks to me like, well, the weight is still there. That's really still an internal force, but the reason is the frame itself is not contributing to the weight. Were we to consider the gravity of, or the mass, if you will, of the frame itself, that weight would shift to a new location.
Yes, the center of gravity. And weight is not an internal force. Acceleration, Earth's gravity, is an external force on your body. So let's make that clear. The reason we're showing it is because it is an external force, not an internal force. We never draw internal forces. Gravity is a external force. So yes, if you had, center of gravity for each of these arms, you would have something here. We're just assuming they're weightless and the cable as well.
But right, but if we were considering the mass and we wanted to draw this without, with what do you say, just external forces, we draw the normals and then a weight, but it would be shifted literally downward by some measure.
Yeah, a small amount. I mean, the log is the heavy thing.
For sure.
So it's just a matter. We'll talk about at the end of the class. We talk about how to calculate center of gravity. And you'll be able
We've been working on it.
Bodies. We're not doing it today, and we're going to assume that those frames are weightless.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Let's go back to, whoops. Let's go on to the next page. So I wanted to give a couple examples, just kind of work through them. Here's my can again, and I've wedged it between, we're going to call it two frictionless surfaces. Really isn't going to be any friction in this particular case. To keep, can you guys see this can? Because it seems to keep disappearing on me. The diagram there.
I can see it.
Okay. So it's pretty straightforward. This is very simple. So again, this would be your sketch. You can draw right on top of the sketch, but your free body diagram is going to be this thing over here on the right. And it's going to have a picture of the circle, the item that you're drawing the free body diagram of, the circle, the log. We'll have the weight, and then we'll have the normal A and normal B. And it's nice to say that there's angles that you'll know them. You would probably either have to solve for them or have them in your problem. This is a pretty straightforward free body diagram. You'll notice again that weight is going straight down. Normal force towards the body we're drawing, so it's toward the body. If you go back and you look at those rules, you notice that it's not going away. Some people, let me switch. Some people get tempted in drawing these things. I'll show you what I don't want to see. So what a lot of people do is they'll have this as their can, and they'll do this, and go W, and then they'll go, okay, well now let's put the normal forces in, and they'll draw them like this. And they'll tell me, it's the same, isn't it? It's not the same. It's not the same. Why is that? If you actually have some distance here, R, and if it was some other kind of force, it might create a moment. So you don't draw it like that. The correct way is NA, NB. Do not do that. If we were
Glad you're
doing,
telling me this. I'd be tempted.
what's that?
Glad you're telling me this. I've been doing that.
Yeah, this is
Same.
fine when we're doing statics of particles, but we're no longer doing statics of particles. We're doing statics of bodies, free bodies, not particles. So don't do that. Mathematically, it kind of comes out the same in this case, but it will trip you up in the future. Trust me on that. All right. All right, here's just a simple one for how to draw forces on a can that's sitting on a table. And there's my big finger. How many of you have seen the Beatles' Yellow Submarine?
Yes.
Yeah.
You remember the big hand that runs around and attacks them? Anyways, that's my finger. All right.
Oh, that was you. You're famous.
Yeah. I was purple back then, so or blue.
Wow.
I think it was blue or purple, indigo. So this is a really rough idea of what it would look like. Again, here's the sketch. You draw it right on the sketch, but this is what the free body diagram looks like. Again, the whole idea is to do the can. So we draw the can only, and then we replace these other things with forces, the bottom surface and so forth. So we have the weight going down. We have the force in the direction that we've applied, the normal going towards the body, and then the friction is going opposite of the direction that the force that is trying to slide. So that would be how you would draw the friction. All right.
Rob?
Yeah.
Andrew just made an interesting comment in the chat, which is that he made a distinction between different types of forces. He called a normal force a contact force. What are the different types of forces we should be expecting today?
Let's go back to so these are the forces right there. So I assume, Andrew, if you're saying contact force, you're talking about an applied force.
I see. Okay. So that's,
Right.
but how is that not a normal as well?
All right, when we go back to that picture, just the fact that my finger is normal is just coincidence. It could be in any angle. So it's
And
necessary.
like a gravity or like a magnetic force, those are like long range forces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they don't have to, they're not applied on the point where they're not actually touching the material or anything, right?
Sure. The part I'm tripping on is the difference between normal and applied, because you have to apply, like a normal happens even if you don't push on it in a normal fashion, even if you push at an angle.
Right.
Hold on a second.
Maybe you're thinking of the other body, like the normal of the can is pushing back on the finger, right? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, there you go.
But we're not talking about the finger. We're only drawing the can.
And all the can do is push back at a normal to the surface.
When you push on the can, there's a normal pushing back, but that's internal in a sense, kind of.
Okay.
W.
But then there's also the friction.
And so this could be, rather than the way I drew it, which was looking perpendicular, this could be at some angle.
Right. You could take a pencil with its eraser and push on the can at an angle. And because of the friction, so now there's also should we add a, yeah, well, there's the friction.
So, I mean, clearly you can take F and have Fx and Fy, right?
I think
Now,
he's
when you
saying,
when
does
you
that,
go to solve this, you're gonna break that into components. But this is how you would draw it with the F.
I think he's asking, does that force F, does that have a normal associated with it? Because you're pushing on the can, let's say with your
You're talking
finger.
about here?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be, again, what's called an internal force. That would be inside of your body. And so that's not drawn.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, that's good. Like I said, a lot of people get confused on the internal versus external forces. So, all right.
In this example, would we, with the force that you have drawn, would it be accurate to put the normal in the center?
No.
Right.
I
So
mean,
how do we estimate?
mathematically, in this case, it ends up being mathematically the same because we have, assuming that the force here is acting on the center of gravity, we would have no moment. So mathematically it'd be the same, but if this was not acting on the center of gravity, this force wasn't aimed at it, shall I say,
Right, like it was above or something.
above or something, then the answer is it's going to make a big difference.
Huh.
Because now your normal is going to contribute to the writing of the turning moment.
Oh, the moment. Oh, we know how to calculate that. Okay.
Right. So that's what we're getting to, is that eventually you're going to be able to use these diagrams to do the summation of your basically your three, your 6 equations. You're going to go back to, we're going to have the sum of the moments in X, Y, and Z, and the sum of the forces in X, Y, and Z. So, of course, this is a two-dimensional problem, so, we're not going to have, like I said last time, we're not going to have this, we're not going to have this, and we're not going to have this, but the moment is still possible to have. All right, so the assignment today, I don't think it's, well, I always say this, I don't think it's hard, but I'm hoping that that you get something out of it and that you're able to do this fairly quickly. Let me just kind of walk through the three diagrams I want you to create, the three free body diagrams. And again, let me emphasize that you're going to have a diagram where you draw everything, and then I want you to create a separate free body diagram. So you can have two drawings, just like I've shown you in the past, where you've got the diagram of all your stuff and the forces and everything involved. And then I want you to draw the free body diagram of the thing I asked of. So just that. So here you've got a can on a sloped surface that's being held in place by a string. So the string is wrapped around, if you will, and it's being held. And so what I want is a free body diagram of just the can. What forces are keeping that can static? So we know we're going to have some, come again?
It's not a statics problem without friction. I don't understand at all.
It says friction.
So
It has friction.
Don't include friction forces.
You're giving the teacher friction.
We're going to have the weight of the can, and we're going to have the tension of the rope. So those are the three forces you got to get in there. All right. And then the next one, what I want is I want to have a free body diagram of just the left can and a free body diagram of just the right can. And then I want you to put both cans together as one body. So that's the essence of what we did when we looked at the three can diagram, is that I want you to be able to put those two free body diagrams together, add them up, and make sure that you end up with the free body diagram of what the whole thing ought to look like. So the internal forces disappear. So make sure that your two free body diagrams, when summed together, end up with no internal forces. So that's the essence of what I really want to get across today, is that you should be able to make those free body diagram internal forces disappear. Lastly, just because I love bikes, you get to have a bike. Here's my artificial hill. I did it sort of like Batman does in his cave. You kind of, or the bad guys do in their cave in Batman. They just kind of turn things. So I'm assuming that the weight, there's a weight to the bicycle, there's a friction surfaces, and that the brakes are on. So I just want you to draw just the bicycle and figure that out. That should be hopefully fairly straightforward. And then lastly, this is an extra credit, is to draw just the wheel. So what I mean by that is I've got the wheel, and I want you to draw the forces that keep this wheel in place. So we'll have the attach point at the axle, we'll have a brake at the disc, we'll have a contact point at the surface here. This is extra credit. That's it. What I'm going to do is put you all into breakout rooms. Andrew and I will come running around. All right, you guys ready? Any questions? All right. So Andrew, you want to take rooms 1, 2, and 3?
Okay. Sounds good. Here. Let's see.
I'm going to go grab a quick refresher on my coffee, and I'll be back.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but somehow when I went to the breakout room, I got logged out, but
You're back.
I'm back.
Do you remember what room you were supposed to be in?
I think it was like number 7.
Okay.
I have a quick question on the first system though.
Yeah.
So for that one, we have tension and we have friction, or do we just have one or the other?
You'll have tension, friction, and weight.
Okay.
Those will be the 3 forces you'll need to draw on that body.
Okay. I have a question. Since the
You also
string-
have a normal force. I'm sorry. There's another one.
Yeah. How do we draw friction? Because the friction is coming from the string being wrapped around the can, correct?
Right. So it'll probably be drawn somewhat different than what you would think. But yes, it'll be drawn opposite the rotation that the string is trying to pull it.
Oh, so we'll draw it as like a rotating sort of force.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. All right. Thank you.
Matthew, are you there?
Hi, yeah. Sorry, I was just now able to get onto the Zoom call.
Okay. Did you not get assigned to a room? Is that the issue?
I have not been assigned yet.
I'm going to put you in room 6. How about that? I know it really matters to you what number, right? Okay, there you go.
Okay, thank you.
Well, well, with the coronavirus, it might be good. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's kind of slimy. It's slimy. Well, the cool thing though is I can make a business and I don't need to buy a retail store to be able to make it work. Right. Well, I think they do there are different ways that you can make it so that way, all your stuff is sourced in the United States and you only ship to the United States or something like that. Like there's certain companies that can't do that. But yeah, but the Amazon they did say that they're gonna be a zero carbon footprint, I think by 2040. So at least they're thinking about it. Yeah, I read about that. But I do know that they got a real kick in the ass because of that, and so they had to totally revamp all their stuff, not by choice, but and they are a company that's supplying a bunch of jobs to people who lost their jobs. So I do know that they're a big source of uh, really, wow, that's you should, yeah, for twice my normal pay, I'll come in. That's what you should have said. Right. Oh, hazard pay. Oh, hazard pay. Yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, yeah, I can't argue. I can't argue with that. Can't argue with that. All right. All right, talk to you later. I'll call you if I think of something.
Hey,
Hey, how's it going?
pretty good. Can I show you my work?
Yes. of
All right.
course.
Hold on. Let's the camera. Damn it. Hold on. Yeah, there it goes.
All right. So that's the first one.
Yeah.
Got the weight, got the normal, got your friction. Yeah, it looks good.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get the second one. You have your NR. Is that
Right.
is that NL on the right one?
Yeah. So I have a right normal.
So why did you label them as different?
Because there's two cans.
Yeah, but isn't that so that's the internal force of the piston. So
yeah.
that's like the key to this, right? The internal forces are the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to label those, although they're in different directions, we're going to keep those at the same variable.
Okay.
So I would just maybe write it as like normal I, like normal internal or something like that.
All right. So normal internal, and then
Cool. Normal A, normal B. And then wait, hold on, go up. So another thing, your angles that you put, right?
yeah.
Although they look different, which is good, I would denote that they're different.
Okay.
Right? Because you got to imagine like someone is looking at your work as fact and they're not actually seeing the physical system, so they don't know like if those are different or not. But
Like
by just putting a different variable on them, now they know for sure that they're at different locations. And also too, like you kind of drew them like, I guess it's a little different, but the right can is a little lower than the left can. I mean, it's close enough. That's fine.
Okay.
But yeah. One angle two. Wait. Normal. Yeah, looks good. All right, and then the bike. So I got normal one, normal two. You have the weights. You have the angles, and those will be the same angle. And then you got friction. So the drawing to the right where it says uniformed,
Yeah.
why do you have the normal pointed to the middle of the bike?
Center of mass.
Right, but normal is a contact force.
Oh yeah.
So that it's literally at any point that the object is coming in contact with the surface,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the normal goes. So there's two normals in the bicycle case.
All right. Should I just erase this one because I don't need it?
Yeah, and then
Okay.
then you could just put your two normals,
Got it.
the tires.
I'll just keep this one then.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good one. Cool.
And then the last one.
Yeah, let me see the last one. What's the last one? I didn't even look at it yet. Let's go. This would include the brake disc. So moment, normal. You guys be the wheel of bicycle. So your free body diagram is just the brake disc. Is that what I'm seeing?
Oh, it's the tire and the brake disc.
It's the tire and the brake disc. Okay, and the moment. Why do you have the moment there?
I was talking to the group and they said I needed a moment to represent the brake disc.
Why?
Just to be honest, I don't completely understand. I just nodded my head and said, "Okay, I guess I'll look at it later."
Yeah. Totally.
That
I
was
originally.
too.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because the brake disc resists the moment, the spin, so that's why I
Right.
added the moment.
Exactly. Good. But in your picture, Daniel,
Mm-hmm.
so you have it spinning clockwise.
Yeah.
But if the brake disc is resisting, right, like slowing down, wouldn't it be in the opposite direction that the wheel is spinning?
Yeah, it's in counterclockwise.
I don't know, I'm not sure. But wait, so
Is my picture inverted?
well, so like a tire rolls
Yeah.
counterclockwise.
Yeah. And then.
And so if you have a brake disc slowing it down,
Yeah.
I would assume that it's spinning the opposite. But
Don't we draw the moment that it's resisting?
the moment that it's resisting. I mean, I would think that we draw the force that the brake disc is applying to the tire. But it's like when you're talking about like, pins and ball bearings and stuff, like, and we're drawing the resistive forces, we're drawing like, we're drawing where the motion's not allowed to go. But I would think like the way that my brain works in this one is that the brake is applying a moment in the opposite direction of the motion. And so when we're drawing a free body diagram of all the forces that are acting on or of the wheel, I would do it in the direction that force is being applied. But we could have I could find Rob and have him give us the final say on it, because I do totally see your point.
Okay.
1 second. Let me find them.
Hey there.
Ah,
We're being recorded. So, you're on the final problem.
Yeah.
yeah.
Let me change cameras. I've just drawn it here. So, let me explain what's going on.
There we go. Yeah.
So you've got your wheel,
No more.
and we've got our weight from the wheel. And then we've got our surface that'll have a normal. And then, of course, we have friction trying to stop the bike. And then we have the normal from the fork arm. There's weight from the bicycle that you drew that's pushing in the middle of this axle right there. And then lastly, we have this disc,
Right.
braking disc, and then there's the calipers that squeeze on it. They actually squeeze this way, but they create a friction force this way to keep the wheel from turning this way.
Not a moment. Knew it.
Does that help out?
Yeah. So I think the thing was a lot of the students were thinking that a moment force was happening because the wheel spins and the brake prevents the wheel from spinning. But I guess thinking about what's really happening, where it's the discs squeezing together to stop it. So yeah, that just applies a friction force.
Yeah.
But is that friction force only applied on that right side? Like, because in my head it's applied everywhere around, because it's making contact like at every point, right? Around the.
It's just making it, there's two discs, two little pucks that squeeze in on that disc.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
If you took the some of the moments at the axle, you would have, let's see, we got a friction force going this way. We'd have, let's call this D1, and call this D2. We would have FS1 times D1, and that's a positive.
Mhm.
That's going that way. And then this one's going to create minus FS2 times D2, and that equals 0. So that would be how we would calculate those. And the reason that N, W, and N2 don't contribute is if they go right through this point right here where I'm taking the moment. So there's no moment arm on any of these three forces, which is why I chose to take it there.
Cool. Yeah, that makes total sense.
So you can quickly see why, in order for these things to be equal, how much greater this one has to be. It has to be greater by the ratio of D1 to D2.
Right.
I'm just joining now, Rob. We actually had this exact question. And I don't see a moment, which is
Good intuition.
Yeah, so there is no moment drawn on the free body diagram, but that's not to say that there are no moments in the problem. That's a different story.
Do we just know that's just improper? We don't put moments in free body diagrams?
They
So if
canceled
you
out the
put-
0.
I won't say that you won't put them in free body diagrams. I'll say that you don't draw internal moments, internal forces, which in this case it would be. You're trying to only draw external forces. So that's really what this boils down to, because I can take a moment anywhere on my free body diagram And because it's in equilibrium, static, it should always equal to 0. And I just chose to take one here. I could take a moment here as well. And again, it should be end up equaling to 0 because it's not moving. But the forces that I have to include to take a moment here become much more complicated.
I need to take a moment. I'm confused.
Yeah, golly. I guess that's why it's extra credit, huh?
Well, so yeah, so what Rob was saying is like what stops the tire are two little what are they, calipers, little brake things that squeeze
Brake
against
pads,
they squeeze against the tire, and then so that pressure creates friction. That's that FS2, and so that friction prevents that rolling, and so we can denote that with just that downward force right there. And then that normal 2 is the normal from the fork, like that's resting on the middle thing.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't. Okay.
Yeah, that is, you're right, David. That's why it's extra credit. I wanted you guys to, really think about this. To kind of, you can apply free body diagrams anywhere. I was kind of hoping to make it, rather than those problems that they give you, which is under devices you'll probably never see, something that you see every single day.
Yeah.
And then is that D1? What's D1?
Oh,
D1's the diameter of the wheel.
That doesn't need to be on there. That's that was just to explain the moment question. So yeah,
D1, that's just a distance.
No, that's pretty cool. Because you've got FS1 cross D1 and they're orthogonal.
Yes.
Minus FS2 cross D2.
Yep.
And they add to 0.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool.
So you
and
can see
another little question. So this is for you guys. So FS1 and FS2 are different type of friction forces, and which one's which? If you guys have got to that point yet.
Golly, are they?
Well, they're I would also, if this is a wheel that's not moving, they're not.
Oh, it's not moving, right? Never mind.
Yeah,
I was thinking of slowing. Well, it's slowing down.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah,
mind.
good point. They would be different. FS2 would be kinetic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, could you draw this as moments? Could I say there's a moment from gravity and then there's a moment canceling that from braking?
If you took the moment, again, there's no external moments applied to this problem. These are all the forces that are in this problem. There are no external moments applied to this wheel. You can use this equation, the sum of the moments equals 0, anywhere on the body. So you could choose to take a moment here. And if I were to do that, if I were to do the sum of the moments at, whatever we're going to call this point Q, if I were to take the sum of the moments at Q, I would suddenly start to have to include W, N2, N1, Fs, and Fs2. All of them would contribute some moment at Q, but they all would somehow sum up to 0.
And it's actually a good thing to think about, because sometimes if you're given distances in your problem, but not enough forces, because you know that they sum to 0, that gives you a huge leg up in an equation. So it solves for part of it. And now, let's say if you were given, FS2, but you needed to find FS1 and you knew what those two distances were, you could measure them. Now you can use that equation to solve for it. So sometimes, although they all sum to 0, it might be useful to use to figure out more information about your problem.
Sure. Are you calling FS2 an external force the brake is applying upon the wheel? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So the brake is separate from the wheel?
Yes, the brake pads are separate from the wheel. So if you go back and look at your picture.
So if you draw in that FS2 going down in your free body diagram, what force is canceling it?
Oh, what do you mean? You mean summing up to 0?
Correct.
So we're going to have We got N2. We're going to do vertical components of N2, W, and N1. So it's basically going to be some portion of N1 because that's the only one going really up, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah. Very cool.
More important is, as I said, is the moments.
But you don't include them.
They're external forces. That's some of the moments, I should say.
Can you give me an example of when you would put a moment into a free body diagram? Does that ever actually happen?
Absolutely.
It does. Okay.
Yeah. Let me erase this one.
It's in the homework a few times too.
Oh, is it?
It
Oh,
is.
good.
So,
There's
for instance,
random
David,
point
probably
moments
the
out
best
there.
example is if you had, let's look at the rear wheel. We were looking at the rear wheel and we were trying to pedal the bicycle. There would be a moment being applied by basically the chain onto the hub. So there would
Imagine
be
a
a
wrench.
moment around the hub trying to turn that wheel.
Or like, imagine a wrench and you're trying to, like you're pushing on the wrench to try to get loose the bolt, right? But you're like, you push on it and like it might be too hard. Like you might need more force than like what you can do, but it's still creating a moment force around the bolt, even if it's not moving.
So if we look at that rear wheel and we had the chain, we would say that there was a moment being generated onto that wheel to motivate the thing forward.
I guess I don't understand how that's different from the brake.
Yeah, I'm with Dave on this one. I'm not really.
I'm there.
The
too.
brake is an external thing that's causing a twist on the wheel.
It's like the
Yeah.
wrench. I mean, the brake disc is, how is that different than a force applied to the wrench at its length?
Well, and I mean, I kind of see both sides. If we can think of it either it kind of depends on if we include the brake disc itself.
We've said we're not. He said the brake is a separate thing.
Then, well, the brake pads are, but if we're including the brake, like the brake, the pistons. What I heard when you said that is that don't draw the pistons because those are in the Z dimension. Like don't draw the force of the pistons, but the force of the friction on the brake disc is that's a regular force. It's not a moment. It creates a moment,
Well,
but
and when the brakes are pushing on the wheel, right? Each side of the brake is having a moment, like it's pushing perpendicular to the way the wheel is spinning, but they're equal. So whatever this guy's pushing, and then that's just creating a friction on the wheel. So that friction force is just pointing straight down. But like if you were to break apart that brake, right, and just focus on one half of it and the wheel, then there would be a moment. See what I'm saying?
So this is our front wheel right here. This is our disc. A lot of times in the old days, the brakes were up here on the rim, and they would be creating a friction force that way. We're just creating a friction force here. This disc is a part of the wheel. On the back wheel, when we're trying to pedal, we're creating a moment around the axis to drive the wheel. We could also have brakes trying to stop it.
in this case they are, although it's static.
Well, actually, in this case, the bike is just sitting there with the brakes on. Nobody's trying to pedal it.
But as far as direction, it's as if they were.
So you said something different there. You said that the inner mechanisms of the front wheel are part of it, which is not what I understood before.
The brake disc is part of the front wheel. Let's look at the wheel.
Yeah, maybe this is just semantics about bike parts, and I do not know about them.
Normally there would be a brake on the outside,
I think you
but
can.
you,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that you can define it as if it's rotating with the wheel, it's considered part of the wheel as far as this is concerned, and if it's not, it's not. So the brake pad isn't rotating, the brake disc is. The brake caliper isn't rotating, the brake disc is. Does that make sense?
That's what it is. Yep, that's correct.
Well, and in this case, none of it's rotating, but if it could. Yeah.
I mean, you could be on the bike with the brakes completely closed, but your feet on the pedals, right? And your feet on the pedals is creating that moment that around the back wheel that's being resisted by the brakes themselves, and you're not moving, right? But there's still that moment created by having your feet on the pedals and basically trying to move in a sense, but your hands are on the brakes.
Yeah, I think I just honestly don't know the mechanics of bicycles as much as you guys do, so I'm gonna give up on this one.
I come at it from the motorcycle perspective, but in this case, it's the same.
I really don't think that's tripping us up really actually as much as how, so for me, like, it looks, there's FS2 that we had is a force at a distance. That is a moment. That is exerting a moment. And it just seems like different styles of notation almost to draw the same thing.
It is creating a moment, but that moment is canceled out by the other moments in the system. And so they're internal.
So, Jason, when you draw FS, you're not drawing it as a moment, are you? You're drawing it as a linear force.
Well,
right?
so I did it both ways, as far as my interpretation goes. So I did it the way this is trying to redraw what you had.
It gets drawn as a friction because that's how it's slowing things down. It's a friction force on that caliper. It's the only way it does it. It does it through friction. So it's drawn as a linear force. It does create a moment, but it is not a moment. It is a linear force, as is the friction force at the surface is also a linear force. And it also creates a moment, but it is not a moment. It creates one, but it is not one.
What is a moment?
A pure moment is just a twist. It's a twisting.
The old screwdriver.
Force. Yeah.
The old screwdriver.
Ye old. So
we use lever arms all the time to create moments. And if we looked at just but they're not. Initially, they start off usually as a linear force.
Okay, so this is how you would like such as.
Yeah, the best that I can see that. I have to get a little closer. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Alrighty. Well, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't mean to
It's
confuse you.
okay. I'm stuck on vocabulary rather than what you're talking about, so I'll ask about it later.
And crank out those homework problems.
Hey, David, do you have a car?
I don't want to, but thanks.
Hey, David, do you have
I
a
do.
car? Does it have disc brakes?
I'm not much of a car guy, so I'm not going to get into it. Yeah.
Probably in
Okay.
front.
All right. I was saying, go out and look at your front brakes of your car and see what they look
Great.
like.
Thanks, guys.
Still,
Noodles.
drum cars is mind blowing to me. Sure, there's a good reason for it, but I don't get it.
What's that, Isaac?
I'm sure there's still a good reason to put drum brakes on cars, on like the rear wheels of cars. They're probably just cheaper, but I don't get it. It's
I know. I was
Vintage.
wondering the same thing the other day.
yeah. Back when I changed my access brakes and I did the front, and then I looked at the rear and I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" This
Is
like
it harder to do?
Drum brakes? If it's anything like a motorcycle drum brake, I didn't do them, but if it's anything like a motorcycle drum brake, they're a nightmare.
It's much harder.
I don't think you can run ABS on drum brakes. Is that? Do you know, Rob?
ABS is just a matter of sensors.
Yeah,
So
but
it's a
like,
matter
would
of-
it work with drum brakes?
It would, but again, as you pointed out, they're not very good brakes, and they're paying a butt to adjust.
So
We have a little bike at work that has front and rear drum brakes, and so like I'll be taking the bikes back to the shipping container we store them in, and I'll bring the little Honda Grom in, which has ridiculous front brakes for its size. They're really good, and I'll like come flying up and like do a stoppie and have fun, and then I bring the Nighthawk back. And on more than one occasion, I've forgotten that it has drum fronts and almost gone into the container at 20 miles an hour because it doesn't fucking stop. Like
Yeah.
you can't slow it down properly. It's terrifying. Yeah.
So I was having this question the other day about why. I think I know the answer, but let's try it here. So why do manufacturers favor disc brakes in the front?
Because they work better.
And why is that a boon? Why not? They work better. Why not put them in the back? Doesn't it all add up to the same?
Oh,
So-
because the front of a vehicle does the vast majority of the braking. So if you're gonna put drum brakes on one of them, it's gonna be the rear. Yeah, because when you and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Rob, when you press the brakes, at least on a motorcycle, when you press the brakes, imagine the weight shift forward. And this is true, I'm sure, to some extent in the car as well. Weight shifts forward, and that transfers into more weight being put into the front end of the vehicle, which increases the rolling friction on the wheels, on the front
So
wheels.
if you looked at your bicycle that was in stationary, and you've got the two normals and the two friction forces, the front wheel, as Isaac described, gets more weight, so the normal force goes up. So the friction force, which can be some portion of the normal force, also goes up. So the friction force can be greater on that front wheel for stopping. So as Isaac pointed out, it is more efficient and does most of the braking on the front wheel. So it makes more sense to spend your money and effort on the front wheels than on the rear wheels.
So to be clear, if they both lock up, if they're both capable of locking up, it doesn't make a difference.
If they,
Yes, if they both lock up at that point, you're going to kinetic friction or
Yeah. Be
on
drifting.
the surface.
You drifting.
Not on the brake pads. Now you've gone to static there, but the friction on the road surface goes to kinetic, which is lower than static, which is why you don't want to skid.
You don't want that, yeah.
Not to mention you lose control. But
So is it more efficient to have like your motor like rotate the front wheels to make the car go than the back wheels? Like, you know, like most cars, right? The back tire, the back wheels are what's driving the car. Unless you have.
Doesn't other stuff come into that? Like it's just expensive to send the power to the rear wheel, and you have more connections, so you're going to lose more power on the way. Because
that's a loaded question that you just asked, Andrew. There are so many reasons to do it each way.
Yeah,
Actually,
and I know.
I think it's actually cheaper to do rear wheel drive, which is why it was done for so long. The reason that they stopped doing it is for two reasons. One is it gets more vehicle space by doing a front wheel drive. You end up with less stuff running back and forth, less running gear. And also typically in the snow and for amateur drivers, front wheel drive is less likely to cause you control problems.
Yeah.
If you talk to an enthusiast or a pro driver, they prefer the rear wheel drive because it gives them more options to go around turns in different ways, such as optionalizing, sliding, or whatever. But the problem with front wheel drive is as you accelerate, just the opposite thing happens. The weight goes to the back, then the normal force becomes less and you have less friction, so you're more likely to peel out. So when you're trying to get power to the road, rear wheel is better.
That's so interesting.
Same reason they put the C8 Corvette engine in the back is they put more weight towards the rear so they can get that sub 0 to 60, sub 3 second 0 to 60 time, because they could get more normal force on those tires in the back.
I was watching an incredibly cool video last night. Richard Hammond from Top Gear does these cool videos on his own about engineering.
Right.
And he did one all about Formula One cars, and he took just a stupid little car and put spoilers on it and took it to a wind tunnel, and he was like quadrupling the effective weight of it. Yeah, by having those spoilers. It also created a shitload of drag, but it was ridiculous. It went from, and then he flipped them upside down, and he's like, all right, if this car was going Formula One speeds, this 800 kilogram car would effectively weigh 200 kilograms because I flipped the spoilers upside down and basically turned them into wings.
Do spoilers actually make sense?
On the cars you see them on? No. But aerodynamics, like even in MotoGP, they have what they call winglets, which are these tiny little things on the very front of the bike that basically allow them to accelerate harder without wheeling, because wheeling causes them to send less power to the ground.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. They had to regulate them because when you crash with winglets, you cut other riders' legs off. But yeah. Anyway, I gotta run.
That was a concern with disc wheels in the bicycles. For a long time, they outlawed them in racing because they were afraid the discs would cut people's stuff off, whatever it was that got in the way. This is proven to be untrue. But
Yeah, I was really surprised. I was looking because I've been looking to get into road bike because I can't really run as much anymore. But the statistics on people who do long distance bicycle riding and like fatal deaths are really high, actually. Have you looked into that at all? Just because of accidents with cars or cars hitting bikes. And if you're riding 20, 30, 40 miles, like a lot, the death rate is actually really high. I didn't think about that. Yeah,
it's a concern. I ride 50 to 100 miles a week.
wow.
I'd say half of it on the road, and it's always a concern for mine.
Yeah, definitely. But all right, guys. Well,
I'm gonna go join Ring 7 real quick.
All right.
I'll be back.
Thanks for all your help.
We're done at 10, right?
Yeah, we're done. Basically, class is over.
All right, I'm gonna head to the STEM. All right, I'll see you guys later.
I'll be back in a bit. I'm probably checking out soon.